On November the 29th of 2018, James Daniel Candelaria was involved in an argument with 29-year-old Prentice Reed in Tucson, Arizona. It reportedly stemmed from an incident at a Circle K near the intersection of Oracle and River Roads, during which Reed had placed a lit cigarette near a gas pump nozzle. The men exchanged words before 37-year-old Candelaria followed Reed with the intention of carrying out a citizen's arrest. While they were outside a restaurant near the intersection, Candelaria brandished a pistol and shot Reed in the back, killing him. Primer County deputies arrived at the scene and found Candelaria with cuts to his face and chest, as well as a box cutter next to Reed's body. Candelaria initially claimed that he'd shot the man in self-defense before eventually admitting that the cuts had been self-inflicted. He went to trial in 2020 and was found guilty of second-degree murder, for which he was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Number 10. Ahmaud Arbery. On February the 23rd of 2020, Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old black man, was jogging in Satilla Shores in Glynn County, Georgia. Suddenly and without provocation, Ahmaud, a former football star athlete at New Brunswick High School, was chased down by three white men. Travis McMichael and his father, Gregory, pursued him in a Ford F-150 pickup truck that reportedly had a Confederate flag symbol on it. Their friend and neighbor William Bryan joined the chase in a separate vehicle. When the F-150 stopped, William took out his cell phone and recorded an altercation that ensued between 34-year-old Travis and Ahmaud. The former had emerged from the pickup armed with a shotgun, which he pointed at the latter. A gunshot was heard, but it ultimately remained unclear if the trigger was pulled before or after Ahmaud fought Travis over control of the weapon. In the moments that followed, a second gunshot rang out and then a third. Travis fired the last shot from point-blank range after Ahmaud threw a punch at his head. Ahmaud bled to death at the scene after he was shot twice in the chest and once in the wrist. No arrests were made for over 2 months. Through a lawyer, 64-year-old Gregory opted to have Williams' video sent to a local media outlet on May the 5th of 2020. Gregory likely expected the clip to exonerate him and the others, but it had the opposite effect. The video went viral, sparking widespread outrage and prompting the case to make headlines. The three men were arrested in the days that followed its release, after they were charged with multiple crimes for cornering and ultimately killing Ahmaud. They would motivate their actions by saying that they were attempting to carry out a citizen's arrest due to the fact that he resembled a suspect of local burglaries. Their defense would result in accusations of racial profiling and calls for them to be charged with carrying out a hate crime. A Georgia law allowed residents to arrest each other if they had reasonable suspicion that someone had committed a felony and the police were not present. The law was largely dismantled as a potential justification for the shooting, one factor being that it was antiquated, as it had existed in Georgia since 1863, and another being that it was very broad in scope. The handling of the shooting's investigation by local authorities drew nationwide criticism. Brunswick Judicial Circuit District Attorney Jackie Johnson was accused of showing favoritism towards Gregory because he'd once worked as an investigator in her office. Waycross Judicial Circuit District Attorney George Barnhill faced similar allegations, as he'd reportedly described the murder of Ahmaud as justifiable homicide. The complaints against him and Johnson were ultimately dismissed. Following their trial in November of 2021, Travis, his father, and William were found guilty of felony murder, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. Travis was additionally found guilty of malice murder. He and his father were given life sentences plus 20 years, while William was sentenced to life with parole available after 30 years. The murder and the attention it generated resulted in national debates over racially motivated crimes and led to Georgia enacting hate crime legislation in June of 2020. The following year, the state repealed and replaced its citizen's arrest law, while in 2022, the Georgia General Assembly designated February 23rd as Ahmaud Arbery Day. Number 9. Fergus Beeley. Fergus Beeley, an English filmmaker and wildlife conservationist who'd once worked with iconic environmentalist Sir David Attenborough, was involved in a road rage argument in July of 2017. Simon Gale had been driving on the M27 with his wife, mother-in-law and son as passengers. 33-year-old Gale was involved in a minor collision with another driver. They both got out and were prepared to amicably resolve the matter when Beeley, who wasn't directly involved in the accident, pulled up behind them. He got out and flew into what was described as a raving state as he started screaming at the family. Gail's mother-in-law recorded Beely telling them, "Get back in the car before you die." When that statement was questioned by the family, Beely emphasized that he did want them dead, adding, "Put your hands on the car and get ready to die. This is a citizen's arrest." He went on to scream, "You're under a citizen's arrest. You're under a citizen's arrest. And I tell you what you are too," while also addressing the underage child in the car. When asked by a witness why he'd gotten involved, Beely claimed that he was trying to stop a death on the motorway. He went on to accuse one of the women at the scene of punching him, which she adamantly denied, and resumed shouting about the citizen's arrest before the video cut off. Gail would accuse Beely of grabbing him and pushing him against the car. Ultimately, no serious injuries were reported. Gail did note that his son had been left terrified to the extent that he slept in his and his wife's room following the incident. 2 claims of assault were made in the aftermath, but neither party pursued the matter further. Number 8. Hannah Payne. On May the 7th of 2019, Kenneth Herring ran a red light while driving his Dodge Dakota pickup through Clayton County, Georgia, and collided with a semi-truck that was near a car driven by Hannah Payne. Herring remained at the scene for 15 to 20 minutes before he drove off. Payne, who was at the time in her early 20s, wasn't directly involved in the accident, but she drove after 62-year-old Herring with the intention of conducting a citizen's arrest. A witness, identified as a state corrections officer with medical training, had treated Herring at the scene and suspected he was experiencing diabetic shock or some other medical emergency. It was reported that he'd shared his suspicions with Payne and that the woman somehow concluded that Herring was drunk and thus took it upon herself to follow him. While pursuing him in her Jeep, Payne was on the phone with 911 and she was told at least once not to follow him, but she refused to comply. She cut Herring off, got out of her vehicle and approached his pickup, allegedly with the intention of getting him to return to the crash site. An altercation ensued, during the course of which Payne brandished her hip-holstered pistol and shot Herring dead. She was arrested for murder and other related charges, but claimed to have acted in self-defense during the trial that followed. Payne testified that she'd followed Herring to get his license plate number. She claimed to have approached him with the police dispatcher on her phone, which she'd placed on speaker. When she was within range, Payne reported that Herring had grabbed her shirt and wrist, dragging her towards his vehicle as he mashed the gas and set the car in motion. Payne admitted to pulling out her gun, but maintained that her finger was never on the trigger and that the weapon went off when Herring grabbed her hand. Regarding her decision to pursue him in 911 calls played in court, Payne was heard disobeying the dispatcher's instructions as she committed to follow the man, saying, "He is drunk. I'm not. I'm sorry, but I'm here to tell you I'm not going to follow him because he is going to cause an accident." The prosecution accused Payne of playing cop and then murdering an innocent man. During closing arguments, the prosecutor told the court, "Do you know how much entitlement you have to chase somebody down, detain them, jump out of your car and run toward a stranger?" Adding, "The audacity to come here and take that stand and blame everybody else." The Clayton County jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Payne guilty on 8 charges that included felony murder, malice murder, false imprisonment, and multiple weapons charges. The young woman wept in court as she was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 47 years served. Number 7. Incident in Florida. In December of 2022, a Facebook post by the City of Jacksonville Beach Police Department detailed how a citizen's arrest to which its officers had responded backfired dramatically. Law enforcement in the Floridian city received a call from a man who was holding a suspect at gunpoint as part of a citizen's arrest. Upon reaching the scene, the cops determined that the supposed suspect was an innocent man who'd been walking on the sidewalk when he was confronted by the caller and accused of being a criminal. They quickly noted that the caller seemed to be having some type of mental episode. He was placed under arrest and his vehicle was searched, with officers recovering an arsenal that included 4 loaded 9mm handguns, 1 loaded .45 caliber revolver, and a loaded 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. They also found close to 12 grams of marijuana and a creepy clown mask. The department concluded the post by writing, "What you see is not always what you get," and that the cops had likely stopped something terrible from happening. Number 6. Brian Kidder and Corey Hurren. Canadian man Brian Kidder was recorded twice attempting to carry out a citizen's arrest on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in July of 2020. Kidder was part of a fringe group known as the Canadian Revolution. Since an anti-Trudeau rally was held on Canada Day, July the 1st, at the National War Memorial in Ottawa, the group camped out and set up a tent village on a patch of lawn adjacent to the memorial. It would serve as a base of operations in their months-long efforts to conduct citizens' arrests of various members of the Trudeau government on what they claimed to be charges of treason and obstruction. The group's campaign was mostly innocuous, as indicated by its social media posts. The Canadian Revolution also believed various conspiracies, including that the country's politicians were engaging in human trafficking and fringe theories about the COVID-19 pandemic and the vaccines. On July the 23rd, Kidder and a small entourage went to the gates of Rideau Hall, Trudeau's Ottawa residence. He announced that he was there to make a citizen's arrest of the Prime Minister for obstruction of justice. Law enforcement officers told Kidder that he wasn't allowed on the premises and the matter was resolved without incident. 2 days later, however, he returned with his posse and walked inside the Rideau gates. As seen in a video of interaction that followed, he lifted his shirt to show officers that he was unarmed before they handcuffed him. Moments later, Kidder dropped to the ground and started shaking for a few seconds. He was helped to his feet by law enforcement and later in the video said he had a medical condition that caused him to suffer seizures. After roughly an hour, he was released from the custody of police and paramedics. During the arrest and in its aftermath, Kidder's entourage screamed, "Cowards!" and various other vitriolic remarks at the officers. One woman was heard shouting, "I hope God lays a curse on your family that never ever outgrows your bloodline, sir." Kidder's attempt at a citizen's arrest came less than a month after Corey Hurren had raided Rideau Hall, seeking an armed confrontation with Trudeau. Hurren, who'd served in the military with the Canadian Rangers, crashed his pickup through the gates on July the 2nd and stormed the premises on foot while carrying 3 loaded firearms and a knife. A 90-minute standoff with the RCMP ensued, during which 46-year-old Hurren told officers that he was there to arrest Trudeau. He cited a number of grievances, including COVID-19 restrictions and recent gun law amendments. He was ultimately taken into custody. Hurren's actions arguably inspired Kidder's, and in light of the repeated incidents, the former received a sentence which was meant to act as a deterrent towards future citizens' arrest attempts against the Prime Minister. In March of 2021, Hurren was given a 6-year sentence. Number 5. Benjamin Hunt. On May the 15th of 2019, Benjamin Hunt and his boss, Jonathan Hassel, were working at the latter's garage in Longton, Staffordshire, when they heard crashing noises and the car alarm of Hassel's Audi. 25-year-old Christopher Walters, who wasn't known to the men, was caught in the act as he was using a sledgehammer to shatter the vehicle's windows. He fled, still brandishing the hammer, and was heading towards a nearby school when Hunt and Hassel gave chase. The duo tackled Walters to the ground and proceeded to restrain him as part of a citizen's arrest until the arrival of Staffordshire police, which reportedly took nearly 20 minutes. Walters kept kicking out and Hassel was holding him by the legs while Hunt held him round the neck. Responding police officers captured Hunt on body cam, still applying the hold to an unresponsive Walters. The latter was later pronounced dead at Royal Stoke University Hospital, with an autopsy concluding he'd suffered fatal compression to his neck. The post-mortem also recorded deep bruising from the left shoulder to the chest, bruising to the nose and face, and abrasions to the arms and hands. Hunt and Hassel were subsequently arrested and charged with manslaughter, as it was deemed that they'd used excessive force to keep the man at the scene. Before he was due to go on trial, Hassel was found hanged in his Longton garage. Media reports indicated that it was Hunt who discovered the body. Hunt eventually pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and in 2021 he was given a 38-month prison sentence at Stafford Crown Court. Some members of the public believe that the man should have never been jailed for what he'd done, arguing that he and Hassel had stopped Walters from causing further havoc. An online petition signed by over 1,000 people argued for Hunt's release, describing him as a mild-mannered, hard-working family man who'd made an honest mistake in trying to stop a criminal. Certain other factors were presented in the petition as potential reasons for compassion rather than punishment, including the trauma that Hunt had suffered while waiting 2 years for the resolution of his case and after finding Hassel's body. Number 4. Christopher Umpenhauer. Shortly after she'd driven away from her home at the Sierra Grande apartment complex in Naples, Florida, Irina Numanovich looked in her rearview mirror and saw her neighbor, Christopher Umpenhauer, getting dangerously close to her. The man then sped up, blocked her, and jumped out of his vehicle. Umpenhauer started screaming obscenities in the woman's face. He was reported to have berated Numanovich for driving too slowly, yelling, "You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to drive." Numanovich later told a media outlet that she thought the enraged man was going to kill her. He proceeded to grab her wrists, claiming that she was under citizen's arrest. Numanovich struggled, at which point Umpenhauer twisted the woman's wrist behind her and pushed her against her car. As confirmed by witnesses, Umpenhauer eventually let her go and before driving off went through her car. Deputies spoke with the leasing office inside the complex and were able to locate Umpenhauer, whom they arrested on battery and trespassing charges. Number 3. Robert Abel. In the spring of 2022, the Clay County Sheriff's Office in Florida received a call from a man they later identified as 55-year-old Robert Thomas Abel. He claimed that he worked for the President of the United States and that he had a meeting with Sheriff Michelle Cook scheduled for Sunday, March the 6th. Abel added that Cook better be in her office or there would be hell to pay, also demanding that she present a letter of resignation or else he'd arrest her for abandoning her post. Deputies deemed that he presented a threat, and come Sunday, they were on standby. Abel showed up as announced and after parking his Toyota in the sheriff's office lot, emerged from the vehicle clad in a green army-style polo shirt, green camouflage pants and tactical boots. Armed with a Smith & Wesson .40 pistol in a shoulder bag, he resisted officers' attempts to disarm him, but was ultimately brought under control. Inside Abel's truck, the authorities reported they found a ballistic plate carrier complete with plates, more loose .40 caliber ammunition, several military MREs, and some coffee and snack items. In a recorded jail interview with county investigators, Abel claimed that he wanted to conduct a citizen's arrest on Cook, reportedly because her office had failed to do anything about the burglaries he'd reported at his home. He presented deputies with a gold ring featuring the engraving W. Gar, which he claimed was given to him by his employer, the President of the US, who at the time was Joe Biden. Abel's bond was set at over $200,000 after he was charged with corruption by threat against a public servant, resisting an officer without violence, and carrying an illegal firearm. Today's topic was requested by Cali Girl living in Nevada, Sean Delap 8587 and Terrell Crouch 3348. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Killer Mike. While attending the Grammys in Los Angeles on February the 4th of 2024, rapper Killer Mike, best known as one half of the duo Run the Jewels, was led away in handcuffs following an altercation with a female security guard. As reported by local authorities, the 48-year-old rapper Michael Santiago Render, by his real name, had tried to skirt a security checkpoint. A confrontation ensued during which the security guard reportedly tried to place him under citizen's arrest. Render allegedly pushed her to the ground twice and threw an elbow at her. Los Angeles fire personnel treated the woman at the scene while Render was arrested for misdemeanor battery. Shortly before he was led away in handcuffs, Render had won 3 Grammys: Best Rap Performance, Best Rap Song, and Best Rap Album for his 6th studio release entitled Michael. Render released a statement after the incident and described the altercation as a consequence of confusion regarding which door he should have used. Render said, "We experienced an overzealous security guard before he expressed confidence that he would ultimately be exonerated of any wrongdoing." Number 1. Road Rage Karen. While traveling down a 4-lane road near the Y interchange in Idaho in the spring of 2022, an unnamed woman began swerving her Subaru erratically before turning the vehicle sideways, blocking the drivers behind her. The woman, who was wearing a hat that read "Blessed," then got out and started flailing her arms before pointing at the other drivers and screaming at them to turn off their engines. Boise resident Daniel Mejia, one of the confused drivers she'd stopped, recorded her throughout the incident. The woman was seen reaching behind as she yelled her commands, possibly to suggest she was armed. It was later theorized that she was attempting to conduct a citizen's arrest. As Mejia tried to drive away from the scene, the woman, whom social media would label Road Rage Karen, came towards his vehicle and banged her hands on the hood. She then struck the outside of the vehicle once more when Mejia drove off. The Boise Police Communications Manager subsequently revealed that the woman's actions stemmed from her experiencing a medical emergency. Given that aspect, no charges were filed, and the woman's son later reached out to Mejia to inform him that she was recovering at the St. Alphonsus Medical Center. Thanks for watching. Would you rather there was no speed limit or that drunk driving was decriminalized? Let us know in the comments section below.